panelists of three amazing people who are doing work within Black mental health in various different areas, from Black children to Black women and also Black men. I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves because that just tends to be my style for a little bit more of an upbeat introduction. But briefly, I'll introduce you to just their names and then allow them to kind of take the lead on what they want to present to you. So I'll start with Talk to Spirit, which is Spirit, media star in regards to where mental health goes. And Spirit can just wave hi to you for now. And then we have a man of many hats, Brandon Johnson, today, who's representing AAKOMA Project, and doctoral student from Columbia University, Brianna Baker. So you all can introduce yourselves in the order that I named you, and we can keep this an interactive discussion, as I previously mentioned, as we move through tonight's conversation. So Spirit, beginning with you. I guess we won't begin with Spirit because Spirit disappeared from the screen. So
I know, like,
Johnson.
am I gone? I guess I'm here
You're
somewhere.
Back. You said, am I gone?
So first and foremost, I have to apologize to you guys because I'm on vacation this week, and this is my first vacation in 6 years. So please forgive me. But it was such an important conversation that I didn't want to miss out. So please forgive me if my service drops out. It's just one of those things. And also, please, if you hear the children running around at some point, please just celebrate that as Black boy joy and Black girl magic, because we have just had a hellacious year like everybody else. And so while they know mom is working, you know, they may still every so often just kind of pop around, and I just let them do what they do. So hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be with you guys. My name is Spirit. Just briefly, I'm a licensed professional counselor, national board certified counselor, and doctor of psychology. I love to just say it's just fancy ways of saying, yes, I'm a real therapist. I have a group practice based out of Atlanta, Georgia, with a variety of therapists. Everybody has their own niche. It is an 11-man team, including our admin team, and we are just really excited to be doing the work. What I'd love to say is, in addition to seeing clients in private practice, I also utilize television and radio to be able to do what it is that we do. But as you will hear me talk about it, I love to say that it simply magnifies the message. I learned a long time ago that the microphone allows us to touch more people. And unfortunately, especially when we talk about communities of color, most of us will never see the folks that really need it the most in the office. And so I just figured out a really unique way to be able to reach our people and to be able to have them go, all right, maybe it ain't what I thought it was. Maybe I can do some. No, that is where you find me, and that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. We won't hold the Black boy joy or Black girl magic from you. Thank you for joining us.
Excellent, because there's a lot of them running around.
So we appreciate you stealing your time a little bit from your vacation this week.
My pleasure.
Okay, Brandon.
Listen, I can relate, Spirit. I'm not on vacation, but you may hear kids running around in the background, et cetera, because this, it's real life. This is how it is. But I'm Brandon Johnson, and thank you again for the invitation. And I am a subject matter expert for the AAKOMA project, and I am also a Master Certified Health Education Specialist. I tell people I'm a hybrid between public health and mental health, but I'm here representing the AAKOMA Project. If you are not familiar, it was founded by Dr. Alfie Breland Noble. And so essentially what the AAKOMA Project does is build the consciousness of youth of color and their caregivers on the importance of mental health, empowering youth and families to seek mental health services, and also really to improve systems that are dedicated to research in Black youth and Black mental health. And so we really want to establish some projects and things that really work around cultural competency, and assets and services that are safe and healthy for youth of color, all BIPOC youth. And so on top of that, I also am the creator of the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, which is a YouTube page dedicated to Black mental health, all things Black mental health. Bring on guests and talk about a number of topics there as well. And outside of that as well, I also do a lot of work in suicide prevention, particularly around Black youth of color. And so again, I am excited and thrilled to be here, and also want to shout out the AAKOMA project and the work that they're doing as well.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for being here. Last but not least, Brianna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brianna. I really go by Bree. I always forget to change my name, but just Bree is fine. Really excited to be here. So thank you, Dr. Paul, for allowing me to join the panel and this conversation, especially, you know, being a student and not always getting to participate in things like this. So I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here. So currently I am a doctoral student at Teachers College, Columbia University, studying counseling psychology. And specifically, I study stigma, identity, and intersectionality, mainly with women of color, youth of color, specifically Black women and young girls. I like to look at socio-political determinants of health, which is anything from policies to social attitudes to political climate, and how that influences our mental health and well-being. So that's what I'm really into. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Black and Mental Health Movement, which is an online collective where we celebrate and commiserate over the Black mental health space. It's just a group of Black mental health researchers, practitioners, community members, and advocates, and we all are just together in a virtual space. Our Black and Mental Health Week is September 20th through 26th. It'll be our second one, so gearing up for that. And then lastly, I am the creator of Becoming Dr. Baker, which is a YouTube channel where I talk about various mental health topics related to BIPOC communities, communities of color, as well as higher education and making pathways for people of color who want to pursue mental health practice. So thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'm excited to get the conversation going.
Awesome. I really enjoy Black and Mental Health Week. Okay, so Spirit, and this is open to all the panelists as we move through. So Black mental health, especially Black mental health, hasn't always been at the forefront of discussion. What made you decide to pursue this as your life's work?
Well, you know, for me, it's very interesting because I didn't look at it as helping Black folks specifically. Being in Atlanta, Georgia, I literally thought, let me open up a practice and let me see what happens, right? And what I realized is, especially being in Atlanta, that this is an anomaly, right? And sometimes even as a therapist in Atlanta, even my colleagues and I, we forget that we are unicorns, right? Because for us, everybody looks like us where we are. So I would say roughly probably 85% of my clients are Black or African American. And I make that distinction because it is different, right? And we all identify different, and you have folks from all over the world. And so Black is not Black for everybody, and African American means something very specific to specific people, right? So it's very interesting. If I go to New York or if I go to California, people go, oh my gosh, the idea of a Black therapist, we don't know what that is, right? And so what we know undoubtedly is when we talk about therapy, that only 4% of clinicians are Black or African American, right? And so that is a huge, huge issue as it relates to representation. And so I think it is my colleague Resma Menakem, I think he just said it so poignantly. And he said that, you know, when you look at trauma and you don't know what it is that you're looking at, when it's decontextualized, right? Meaning we don't look at it within the right context. He says that trauma decontextualized within a person looks like personality. And that trauma decontextualized within a family looks like family traits. And that trauma decontextualized within a people looks like culture. right? And so when we talk about the culture of African Americans or Black people, we recognize that there is so much intergenerational trauma that is yet to be looked at, that is yet to be understood, and is yet to be healed in any meaningful kind of way. And so once I recognize that it takes a deeper understanding to not only know the lived experience, but to know what it is that we are looking at, I recognize that there is a lot of work to be done in our community, but not just to be done, but to be understood. And until we understand ourselves, my own therapist told me many years ago, Spirit, you'll only be able to take people as deeply as you yourself are willing to go. And that was a very scary thing, to look at my own trauma, to look at my own legacy, to look at how racial trauma has impacted my life. But until I was able to make those connections for myself, I recognized I couldn't help my own people make those connections. And then, even more importantly, I realized how many of my own folks have not made the connection. So for me, it is a very, very meaningful type of work. And I'm happy to lead that charge.
I'm happy that you are doing that also. Brandon.
Yeah, I think particularly for me getting into this work really started just from growing up in Baltimore City. Born and raised in Baltimore, and there are so many things that I grew up seeing, right? Exposed to things that I witnessed, and things that we witnessed that we thought were normal, right? Like because everybody experienced it, everybody to the left and the right of me experienced it, and we went through it collectively, and we, begin to, normalize it. We didn't see it as an issue. And then as I kind of got older, you have your friend group, your family, and you start to notice, just as Spirit said, you start to notice some things, and you're like, this isn't normal, or if it is normal, it shouldn't be, right? Like this shouldn't, fit in normal context. There's, especially, in Baltimore, there's a lot of poverty, crime, corruption, and things that you kind of see, and there's also a ton of beauty and beautiful people and beautiful things happening in this space. And so as I was, kind of going through life, I really felt passionate about wanting to support people and give them the tools, the understanding, the words, the knowledge to really understand and unpack some of the things that we all went through that we didn't realize was traumatizing us. Things that we processed in a certain way together. I wanted to figure out a way to get engaged in this space. And so I went to Morgan, got into psychology, and really wanted to do it on a larger scale. I don't think I have the capacity to be a clinician, and so I'm grateful to each of you all, because I don't think that was for me. And so I wanted to get into public health, and to work with places like the AAKOMA project, to find out about organizations such as the Upswing Fund. And I want to shout them out, because they're the reason I'm here today, because of their support for organizations doing this work around young people of color and LGBTQ plus youth. But to get connected to those organizations, to figure out how can we collectively serve the community, how can we serve each other, how can we take the strengths and the assets that we have that we don't often think about, or we're taught not to think about and appreciate. How can we use those to improve our mental health and our mental well-being? And I think that's what's really led me into getting into this space.
I think that's one of the beautiful parts about like mental health, and even our panelists here, right? We have those that are clinicians, and all of you seem to be utilizing social media in some form or format, right, in order to broadcast the message. And the other beautiful part is we have researchers and also individuals who are doing the public health work, right? Public health, and oftentimes it's pushed to the side when we talk about those conversations. And I think culture, right, is a big part of all of what pretty much what brought all of us here, right? I vividly remember the Boondocks episode where it talked about like the culture is toxic. And it was like, it blew our mind because it was a cartoon telling us that, yeah, we're doing all these things, but is it necessarily healthy, right? We pass it along intergenerationally, but at what point do we say stop? And understanding that even as we shift those things sometimes, that ultimately people aren't always going to buy in right away, right? So Brianna, take the lead.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to, well, one, I can relate to watching the Boondocks because I used to watch that religiously. But I can also relate to a lot of what Brandon was saying, but kind of in a different way. So I grew up in the rural South, where there are no Black people. I grew up in a very kind of isolated way. I feel like from my culture, it was really hard for me balancing two different identities of being Black, but also being in this very predominantly white space. My town had maybe 6,000 people in it. About 86% of that population was white. I didn't have a Black classmate until college. I didn't have a Black teacher until college. A lot of these experiences that I had were just so lonely and so isolated. So I got kind of interested in this when I started realizing that my identity, or my multiple identities that I have, were different from that of my classmates. Particularly, you know, I'm going to show my age, I guess, but when I was in high school, Black Lives Matter had just started. So it was 2013. I think I was, you know, maybe a sophomore, maybe junior in high school, or 2012, and the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and trying to process that, where in my town, there was still rallies, there's still opposition even about celebrating Martin Luther King Day. So I grew up in a very, very, very politicized kind of place. And that caused me to, I mean, definitely the racial trauma, but just the depression, the anxiety, the constant being cognizant of just the social, emotional, behavioral fields of those around me, and always having to navigate with such a high level of vigilance. It took a toll on me. And so when I got to college, I discovered psychology and racial identity. I worked with Dr. Enrique Neblett, who has pioneered a lot of work in racial identity and youth specifically. And seeing myself mapped onto, you know, these different stages of coming to terms with not only my racial identity, but my gendered racial identity and my socioeconomic status and, you know, my geographic location, and how that all influenced my mental health. So a big part of, you know, what I'm passionate about and the work that I do is giving people the opportunity, kind of as Brandon was saying, to have the verbiage and the language and the capacity to express not just mental illness, but just things that affect our mental health. How do we talk about mental health? How do we change the discourse, especially in the Black community, surrounding mental health, so that it's not so highly stigmatized, and that it is something that is just normal to talk about? Like, I'm having a bad day, so what? You know, let's talk about it. So that's, you know, kind of where my passion comes from.
Awesome. I can see why you got into intersectionality work, right? It's actually a perfect segue into my next question, right? So when thinking about like the different social determinants of health, such as like racism, even though it's race, right? That's what they say. And then like socioeconomic background and those sort of things, what is the current state of Black mental health, right? And regarding stigma and access, for now I know, because I feel geriatric now and my gray hairs are showing, right? Where was it when you started, right? And where do you currently feel the state of Black mental health is? What are you seeing, right? I know everyone went nuts yesterday when it was yesterday or the day before when Meek Mills put like his tweet about like, let's making therapy cool, right? A lot of us have been kind of doing that work already, but it's amplified when celebrities or other people join in the conversations. So where do you feel that we currently are, Spirit?
Well, you know, I would say that the needle hasn't moved at all. And yes, I did respond to Meek because I was like, hold up, pimpin', hold up. Okay, let me just say the therapy is already cool. We just waiting for more of y'all to realize the experience that we're giving you and catch up, right? But it's interesting because even to Bree's point, to show my age, right? High school for you, Brianna, was Trayvon Martin. High school for me was Rodney King, right? The 90s. And high school for my parents was the Watts riots, right? And high school for my grandparents was Martin Luther King Jr., right? So when we talk about how far have we come, I would say we are really standing in the exact same place. And we haven't even scratched the surface to talk about what racism has looked like within our profession, right? And so because we can't talk about how this is the same system that has wounded and traumatized, already wounded and traumatized people, we can't really understand why people are afraid to access care. And when we get into intersectionality and we talk about the role of the church and how the church has played a role in being the safe haven for us, not just from a spiritual place, but from an educational place, from a social place, from a financial place, we have not bridged the gap and bridged the divide like we need to really be able to step up and affect change. So I would say that we are really just scratching the surface as we talk about mental health and wellness. And when we talk about being a part of now a system, we have to acknowledge that we are part of a system that once represented oppression and in many ways still does. Because when you're talking about still 86% of clinicians being Caucasian, and they have not done the work to understand the cultural systems, nor have they done the work to really understand their role in the system, right? And when we talk about even the way that we're looking at mental health, I mean, look at it. We're still talking about BIPOC versus white, right? And even that centers whiteness, because what it says is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And then we'll say, we'll talk about some Black folks, we'll talk about some Indigenous folks now, then we're going to lump everybody else as people of color. But we're going to put all of you guys over here. And then the only thing else is non-white. So then that's still how we're still doing it. We haven't even figured out within our industry how to do it in a way that really promotes wellness. So we are still very much at the beginning. And what we really have to start doing is asking the hard questions, challenging ourselves first, and then challenging the rest of our colleagues to really take those hard looks and to say, when we're talking about race, like you said, Dr. Paul, and we're talking about racism, we have to make sure that they're included in the conversation, because what we're talking about is communities of color doing the work. But wait a minute, we all have to do the work. So when we talk about racial trauma, why are we not asking white people about racial trauma and the role that it plays for them, right? Meanwhile, we're trying to say everything that talks about race is CRT right now, right? And we're so ashamed and so angry and so frustrated of the history and so frustrated of just the conversation around race. And when I say we, I'm talking about our white colleagues now and our white neighbors and our white brothers and sisters, that it's such an uncomfortable conversation that they don't know how to be included. And we have to be even careful about words like inclusion, because who's the person doing the inclusion, right? And oftentimes, even in the space that still centers the majority culture and puts everybody out, that requires them to include us. So we really have to start taking a look and saying, where are we? We're right at the beginning. But the beautiful part about that is that we can be empowered and look at the role that we play in shaping what needs to be shaped right now. So it's a critical time, but we have to recognize our power, we have to recognize our unity, and we have to see ourselves as colleagues and not as competition. You know, I have to tell folks all the time, I got new folks that are coming in, right? I've been here for a long time. I'm in my mid 40s, right? So when folks come in, I had a colleague the other day that said, Spirit, I'm trying to catch up to you. And I said, you're trying to catch up to me? What do you mean you're trying to catch up to me? I want to be just right where you are. And I said, so listen, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. One, if you catch up to me, either I stopped or I'm doing something wrong. So that doesn't make sense. But here's the other part of that. We're colleagues. I'm not in competition with you. I'm not trying to get somewhere or outpace you. I can never see enough folks out here that need me. You will never be able to do enough healing work. If anything, I'm trying to refer folks to you. I'm trying to have you teach me what you know. I'm trying to capitalize on your understanding of the groups that are coming behind me. I'm trying to give you all of the information that I've gotten about the groups that are in front of me and in front of you. We have to work collectively. We have to know that every part of this moves the needle. So whether you're a researcher, whether you're a clinician, whether you're an advocate, whether you're a life coach, I don't care what it is that you do, it's all interconnected. And so when we talk about where are we with Black folks in mental health, again, I just can't help but say we are right at the beginning. but this is the perfect place for us to be, in the perfect time, in the perfect moment, because we are the most needed right now. Right now.
I appreciate, if I wasn't a fan before, I'm a bigger fan now, right? I think those are so many of the conversations that I have just on a daily basis that I've had with people who are on this panel. But I also think that's what's important to highlight is, especially since we are coming from these systems that typically people distrust, we almost, people from our own communities sometimes look at us like we sold out rather than to buy into what we're saying. Brandon, do you think that we're also at the beginning?
I'm going to take a piece of what Spirit said and kind of tap into that part where Spirit, you said like we're in the part where there's shaping, right? And so like I really that resonated with me because I feel like that is the point in where we are, that we have one, there's been a number of people, including people, like Spirit and the work that you've done, and others who have like laid this foundation where, there were places and systems that weren't listening. Still, we got a lot of them that aren't listening now, but we
Purposely
had,
excluded, right? From the research to
right,
everything else, purposely excluded.
purposely excluded, purposely marginalized. Um, Absolutely. And so I think we're at the point where, there are more people, I think, listening to us. And I think we're building spaces where we're just doing it ourselves, right? Like we understand where the needs are, and we're doing it. And even, speaking on the AAKOMA project, a lot of the community-based participatory research that we're doing and engaging, young folks of color is critical. So as we talk about, there's such a lack of funding that is going to Black researchers. I could stay here and set up shop for the rest of the conversation and be unfair, but I'm not. But we know that disparity is major. So what does that mean? That means a lack of interventions for Black people that have been tested with Black people, that has Black people have been engaged in the beginning, not used to kind of, we got our funding, we know what's wrong with you, we're gonna come into your community and we're gonna fix you. Not that, but CBPR, which is harder, but coming in at the beginning and saying, how can we work together? You tell me what's going on. How can we engage? Where are the assets? Where are the people that are pillars of this community that can speak historically on the needs and the challenges and can tell us what has already been tried and didn't work, right? And so how can we, engage that? And I think that there are a number of, so many places and people engaged in that type of work. Spirit, you also mentioned the faith community. So, AAKOMA has done work with faith communities in their faith-based, mental health promotion work. And how do we engage, faith communities again in the beginning and figure out how we can partner with faith communities because they're so trusted in the community to deliver mental health information, to decrease some of this stigma, to get people, services. The church that I attend here in Baltimore, our first lady is a licensed professional clinical counselor. So we get it, but how do we, help and move others who want to do the work, get engaged with that and may have different ideas on how to do it, right? So I think we're in this shaping point where we are looking at where the trouble spots are. There are more of us than there's ever been, not enough, not nearly enough, but working to do this work. And I think we're also understanding that we will need to pull in other clinicians, as Spirit said, also to do this work. There just aren't enough counselors of color and Black counselors to do the work. So we need to engage in doing the work in cultural humility, cultural competency. How do you understand and engage with someone to understand that you don't know everything about their culture? You don't have this checklist to be like, I'm proficient and competent in your culture in particular. Like, we're moving past that and saying, I don't know everything. You tell me what it means for you. How does this impact you? How are you processing things based on, your culture and things? And I think that's where we are, where we're shaping where we want to go and what this could look like, still dealing with the same barriers in terms of research funding, still dealing with the same barriers of being excluded and not being able to get papers published and all sorts of things like that. But I think that we are aggressively moving things forward and shaping how we want this to look.
I think that you can kind of both intersected at a piece, right? That Black is very complex. So we don't even know what Black really is, right? And what is Black culture? When we, as an Afro-Caribbean girl from Brooklyn, New York, like majority of my clients are Afro-Caribbean, unlike Spirit, who's like, I have African-American clients. So when we speak about Black as not being a monolith, this is important to recognize shaping and shifting. Yes, there's similarities, but shaping a culture means shaping multiple identities and cultures at the same time and moving that forward. So Bree.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than, I agree wholeheartedly, especially with when we're talking about shifting cultures. One of the things with intersectionality and the research that I do is balancing or finding that kind of fruitful balance of celebrating these individual idiosyncratic nuances that people have while also paying attention to the collective and shared experience that we have as Black or African American folks. So I think that is crucial. The other thing is, I'm ready for action. I think that we are, at the beginning, but like Brandon said, I do think that we're aggressively moving forward. I personally have seen much more visibility in the Black mental health space in the last year or so. And that may be due, to the murder of George Floyd and to the racism pandemic or whatever you want to call it. But I have seen that just in the past year. So I do think aggressively moving forward, I'm going to take that. I feel like that is, definitely the direction that we are going into. We don't need another study telling us that Black people have been traumatized. We don't need another study saying that, Black people have worse health outcomes or, compared to the white counterpart. I don't think that that's what we need. I think that we need aggressive and present action now. So I think that we're at a great point of beginning that action, but has it started at the rigor or at the intensity that it needs to? Maybe not yet, but we're getting there.
Thank you for that. I agree with Brianna. I think that like my doctoral program, even though it's in social work, like the focus is on social innovation and change. So when Spirit said we're not really quite there yet, I'm like, yeah, we definitely aren't. But like when you look at research, how to change your mindset, it usually takes 60 years. So some of us will never see it 100% fully change. And that's why it's important for us to collaborate and even teach and kind of be generative and bring those along. In order to not only shape, but to shift the culture. I think that's just as much important as shifting it, right? Because ultimately we want it to be shaped in the ways that we know as researchers, clinicians, and those on the outskirts and advocates in order to kind of get to where we want to go. So what are your current contributions to eliminate these barriers that we discussed? In awareness and access, right? So when you're talking about like not only talking about the awareness piece, the action piece is a big piece, right? But what are you doing individually and as a company? And I want you to highlight some of these barriers that some of you already maybe spoke about, but in your particular areas. So Spirit.
Oh gosh. I'm just laughing because you said, what do we do? I was thinking to myself, what don't we do? And I think for me, it's really just about, again, how can I lend my voice and my expertise in as many different places and spaces as possible? I have learned to never say no unless it's outside of my competency. But what I also have learned and what I am also trying to explain to my colleagues is that 9 times out of 10, you are the expert in most of the rooms because you will be the only mental health professional. And so what we have to do is we have to get outside of the box and stop thinking about the traditional ways that therapy was invented, how the founders looked at it, because 1, we're in a very different time, and 2, that did not include most people. Unless you were a white, rich, landowning male, you were not thought of in terms of therapy. Heck, just being real, they didn't even think that Black folks were had mental health to be concerned about, right? And how they treated us way back when they were first founding these ideas around mental health and wellness. What they thought is just whip you until you have the life back in you if you seem to be looking like you are dealing with depression, right? Cut off your toes so you can't run away if you seem like you're dealing with anxiety, right? So we weren't even thought about in those ways and in that context. So what I will say is most of the time, I say yes to showing up in the space, and looking at what people are thinking about, looking at what people are talking about. And also, I'm like Bree, I am past what I consider to be performative contrition, which is just the, oh, we are so sorry, and oh, we did not know, and we are going to do better. I'm like, okay, yes, you are, and I'm going to be your accountability partner. And better starts right now, right? What actionable steps are we taking? What measurable steps are we taking? And when are we coming back to evaluate the steps that we consented and agreed to taking? Because I don't want to hear a year from now, we're still just writing very firmly worded messages of encouragement. That to me is just performative, and I don't want to see or hear it. So I'm showing up in every space. I am in the courtrooms. I'm talking to the judges. I am talking to the legislatures. I utilize television and radio however I can to showcase to people what quality therapy looks like. Not just therapy, but quality therapy, because there's also a difference there. We just have to be real, right? So for me, it's really about, and talk about how we move from mental health, which is what everybody has, to mental wellness, which is about thriving. What does it take for any population or community to thrive in a space?
Okay, so it looks like we lost Spirit for a second. So Brandon, jump right in.
Absolutely. So, essentially, the work of the
Okay,
AAKOMA
I guess maybe I'm back. Okay.
You're back. I hear your voice, but I don't see you. Brandon, you can continue.
Okay. Um, so essentially, I mentioned it before, but the work of the AAKOMA project really is to, understand better the disparities that are impacting our youth of color and their mental health and mental wellness. So engaging, particularly one thing that we're focused on is engaging youth voice. There's so many things that we're trying to figure out without youth at the table. So many things that we're trying to understand, about what, kind of what's happening. Like you said, I think Bree said it, but we know where, many of the challenges are, in engaging with solutions and getting to solutions. And I think it came up in the chat. Somebody said, what are the solutions? And when we're talking about improving the mental health and wellness of Black youth and youth of color, or overall, is having them at the table, understanding, what are your barriers to care? What are some of the things that are hindering you and harming you, but more so, where do you find the solutions? Where are the solutions as you see them? Where are the assets in your generation as you see them? And including that and engaging with other individuals and community members, doing the work and educating them from where our young people are. There's so much, strength and asset there. And so we're tapping into that, again, engaging in community-based participatory research. So that CBPR thing is powerful. Like I said, it's more difficult to do, but there's so much good that comes from it, and so many things that can be created from it, and engaging to create culturally sensitive and culturally minded, culturally created interventions to help our young people, their families, and caregivers as well, in engaging their mental health and wellness. And so we continue to work with faith-based organizations as well, to continue to have them in the table, because we, understand how powerful of an asset they have been, as Spirit said, in our community, and how they can continue to do that. So still engaging in that space as well. And during the pandemic, creating opportunities for young people to get together, whether it's virtually or in person, to to engage socially. So there was a virtual sip and paint that AAKOMA did very recently. So those kind of things to engage our young people, to help improve their mental health as well. And so also, there is again, a lot of work being done in Black youth suicide, as we continue to see those numbers increasing, especially with our younger people. It is a challenge, really, because again, we can talk historically, but in suicide prevention, we have not been at the table. We have not been there. We have not been present. And, because of that, there's a lack of intervention specifically designed for our Black youth, despite the numbers that we're seeing. So in my work, it's engaging with a number of organizations to really engage about this work, understand where the issues are, and then create pathways for intervention as well. And then there's the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, continuing to create content. One thing that we created recently is called Future Black Voices, where, and Dr. Paul, thank you for being on, but essentially creating videos and content, particularly for entry-level professionals or college students who are interested, in getting into mental health, public health, or social work. So giving them small videos from professionals who are in the field to help our up and coming Black professionals understand some of the things that they may not be getting in their coursework, talking about equity and talking about, dealing with, your own challenges and, dealing with any problems that may arise as you go through your coursework, how to choose a major, all of those type of things. We're creating content, particularly for those young people as well. And so that's kind of really where my work is.
Bree, what are you currently doing at TC, my fellow INS?
Yes, I can't wait to get to New York City. So for reference, I'm still in North Carolina. I'm still in that small town I referenced because COVID did not allow me to move to New York City. So I will be there soon. But while I'm here in North Carolina, I've been able to do a few things because rural communities, because Southern communities are so dear to my heart. I started a project called Girls Reaching Optimal Wellness, which is GROW, where I basically facilitate a mental health and wellness social justice program for girls and young women of color in one of the most rural school districts in my area. So that has been probably some of the most life-changing work for me personally. I've learned a lot through that, kind of the community engagement that Brandon was talking about, but speaking to young people, speaking to young girls and giving them the opportunity to voice what they're feeling, to voice their concerns, their fears, because you realize at that age, you just don't have a voice. You don't have a space to really feel and to express without limitation. So that is one of the things that I'm doing. I'm also doing something that is like very opposite. So sorry, one second.
That's fine. That's your baby is going off at this time.
Listen, everybody's got them. It's real life.
It's real life.
So sorry about that. Our doorbell rang. Yeah, that's my baby. But I'm doing something. So I think that mental health is so integral in so many spaces and at so many levels. So you have the personal level, the community level, and then the macro and policy level. So one thing that I'm doing that's a little bit out of my comfort zone and a little bit out of my area is I'm actually interning at a pharmaceutical company working to diversify their clinical trials related to neuroscience. So that's depression and anxiety, ADHD, and looking at that in Black folks because they don't have specific targets or numbers or that they need to meet for Black people in those clinical trials. So usually the representation is around 0.5 to 2% of those trials. And that goes for the drugs and therapies and interventions that we're creating in mental health. So that's something that I'm doing that is completely different, but something that I've also realized has such a strong impact. Working on achieving mental health and just health equity in general through that space has been an interesting experience because pharma in general, the science industry, academia, has a bad rep with the Black community. We are known for having a history that implemented and inflicted and perpetuated racial trauma, structural discrimination, racism. So working to dismantle that and being able to have a seat at the table and working to dismantle that at one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world has been such an opportunity for me to address some of these concerns that plague our community. And also realizing and voicing to people that, my health as a Black person ultimately affects your health. The health of your neighbor is going to affect your health as well. And I think that when we talk about equity, that it's really important, kind of that inclusion piece that Spirit was talking about, that, it trickles down and it affects everyone. So those are some things that I'm working on, as well as the Black and Mental Health Initiative, of course, which, really excited about our week. And every single day of that week in September, we kind of tackle a different issue or a different subject related to Black and mental health. So it may be racism in the academy or tackling racial trauma, looking at Black representation in the mental health space, because 4% of us are represented here. So that is incredibly important. And then the last thing is, through my YouTube channel and through media and social media, taking the opportunities where I can to really be a voice, especially because I can still straddle that youth voice and trying to be an adult voice. So having the opportunity to kind of straddle both of those worlds through YouTube, through showing people this is what a PhD student looks like. They're not all stuffy, they're not all white. We have fun, we research, and we're passionate about our communities. So those are some things that I'm doing to kind of tackle the issues that I think are most pressing for Black mental health.
I'm blown away by all of you and all of your experiences in that way. I find it absolutely wonderful. And I think you showcased that mental health isn't just for one particular area. There's not one institution or organization that exists without mental health. Recently, the Black Broadway cast, like they reached out to me to just come and talk for 5 minutes in August, right? So I think that no matter where we are, it's just a matter of tapping into stakeholders who want to join you in the mission, right? Especially since individuals are dealing with mental health issues, or even trying to achieve, like Spirit mentioned, right? Mental wellness. I think that's all of our goals, especially as we kind of trek through this pandemic. And just navigate our own individual lives. So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to start putting the questions, if they have, for the panelists within the chat, and then wrap up with 2 final questions. So how do you envision, like, therapists and researchers can encourage participation and increase help-seeking intentions in the Black community? Right? We noticed that areas and access of barriers and those sort of things. And I get that those things are real, but if we can make it an individual issue for now, right? How can we get those people in? And even how can researchers kind of take the lead on that? Spirit.
Well, for me, I think, as Brandon talked about the youth, I am looking at all the way down to K, right? So we're talking K through 12. And I actually have developed a mental health program that we've been fortunate enough to begin to pilot in the Atlanta area so that we can get that empirical data. My PhD is in research methods and evaluation. So I'm as much of a researcher at heart as I am a clinician. And I like the data because I like to show, and, of course, for other communities, that is what they love to rely on, right? Unfortunately, we don't see the value, even though I'm a qualitative clinician. We don't necessarily see the value of lived experience with the same weight and the same richness that we often see that empirical quantitative data. So it requires both. But like I said, I am all about that lived experience data myself. But I think that, if we do this right, when we talk about kindergartners and primary school and middle school and high schoolers, if we can incorporate mental health services into their daily functioning, which is what we've done, we actually have put clinicians into their daily functioning so that they had weekly therapy services in the same way they would have speech therapy or any other type of vocational services that they qualify for. And we negotiated ways for them to be able to look at that as part of EIP or their EIP programs, their EIP plans, to really be able to look at those services. We looked at doing anxiety and depression screeners in the classrooms to really be able to look at those students who really were at high risk or already had mental health issues that were being overlooked. We looked at not just providing those services to the students, but also to the teachers, because let's be real, those teachers have mental health issues as well because they're not getting mental health care. And we also talked about not just the actual clinical services, but also that psychoeducation, so that the teachers and administrators could understand, how do you deal with a student that is dealing with anxiety? How do you deal with a student that has depression, so that you are not triggering them or further exacerbating the situations? How do you negotiate those care services that are needed with their parents? How do you bring the parents in for family services? So we really look at making mental health a comprehensive way of functioning, right? We have to get to the point where we are talking about mental health and wellness as a form of prevention. Let's not wait until we're dealing with illness. How do we incorporate it? You know, I really want a young kid. So now Bree is the young one in the group, right? But I want Bree to be the old person in the group. So one day when she's sitting here talking to us, the younger folks will be like, how didn't they have therapists in the schools? I mean, how did they function? I want it to look like horse and buggy to them, right? I really want mental health to be seen as that everything that we do begins and ends with our mental health and wellness, and that our physical health and our mental health cannot be separated, right? We are one whole functioning complete system. So how do we begin to look at that? And how do we begin to say that ultimately the most important thing, before grades, before degrees, before anything else, is your mental wellness, not just your mental health. What is the quality of your mental health? And until we start to put that first, we will continue to suffer as a society. So I think that that's where it begins, at the very, very beginning, at the very beginning.
Brandon.
So I 100% agree with Spirit. That upstream approach in changing language early on. So, our young people are getting this and understanding this, early is definitely important. To tap into your questions, particularly around researchers and what can researchers do, I think a big piece of that is changing the power dynamic. Research has a power dynamic. So when we, engage with people, when researchers, when we have the funding, a piece of that is power and control and engaging in specific communities. But going into that, changing the power dynamic, again, bringing them in at the beginning, at every part of the research process. And in particular, on the back end, when we mention and talk about the data piece, allowing the community to own their own data, especially if you're going to do it like Spirit said, and doing the qualitative piece, that's their stories, that are their experiences. And we are not in the position to take that from them and not leave that with them, so that if they want to pursue their own funding with it in the community, then they're able to do that. That shifts power dynamics. And so people will want to be engaged if they're like, hey, they came in, we worked together collaboratively, we got the data, we were able to get this funded over here for a community initiative that we had. If somebody else was to come in, yeah, how can we build together? Because the power is mutual, right? At this point, we're building with each other and we're creating systems of change and building capacity. So I think, on the research side, there's that part of it. And I think on the access side and getting people engaged, especially with young people, again, having the ability to work with clinicians to change this aspect of cultural humility, because then the interventions change. So many of us, and we talk a lot of things in community and in culture, is word of mouth. We've had so many of our people that have gone into therapy and been harmed and been further traumatized. And so they're not going to recommend somebody else to go to therapy. So as we begin to change those conversations and look at interventions differently, and engaging with individuals to, build a level of care that works for them, that includes culture, that includes their belief systems and their community supports, then at that point we change outcomes, we change experiences. And then that person, as they're working through their own healing in that processing, they're telling somebody else in the community, it's safe now. This place is safe. This is safe. We can go there and not, and not be harmed and not be, further traumatized. And so as we do that, I think we begin to shift conversations. And so I think from the research side and the access side, I think those are two key ways that we would have to go.
I wasn't laughing at your work. Brandon, a fly is attacking me.
Listen, I
So
saw
I
the
apologize
fly,
if I'm like
and
doing
so I knew
voices
something was
on this
attacking you
end.
at that point. It was right.
Brianna,
I get it.
please go ahead.
Yeah, again, not much to add because I wholeheartedly agree with the both of you. Spirit, when you're talking about early intervention and early access, I think that is so key because when I was going through school, mental health wasn't discussed. When I talked to my girls through Grow, they're like, what is mental health? Do I have that? Is that for me? As a woman of color, not seeing themselves as the type of person who can discuss mental health and definitely not go to therapy. Our school district has one social worker that they share between about 9 schools. So there's just no even, space or place for these girls or for the students in general to access services, to learn about services. And the teachers are overburdened. They don't want to be the therapist, they want to be the teacher because they don't have the capacity or the time or honestly the money to do so and function in all of those roles. So I completely agree with that. And then Brandon, what you were saying about establishing equitable partnerships, I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. I do think that more power needs to be given to the people because one thing is that I feel like Black communities all over the place, they know what works for them. They know how to heal. They know the things that, bring them joy and that allow them to flourish. We just need the funding. We need the structure to be able to implement those things. So a lot of my work then goes back to policy on these macro level changes that we can make. So I know in 2020 or 2019, there was a mental health equity bill that never reached the Senate. There's also the Social Determinants Accelerator Act, which currently probably won't reach the Senate. But these things that are trying to, make these structural level changes and affect these, sustainable change for people of color, for Black folks to be able to access mental health care, quality and effective mental health care at that, I think that is one of the ways that we should go. And with that, it's hard because as researchers, we're so distant, from macro level policy, from legislators. A lot of the time, they want to continue to push their own agendas without looking at the research, without talking to the mental health professionals, and definitely without talking to the communities themselves. So we have a long way to go with that. But, if I had a magic wand, that's what I would do.
I appreciate the policy speak. Anyone that follows me on Twitter knows I just tweet like policy is my love language, probably once a month. Ultimately, because a lot of the work I do is like shaping and shifting like mental health, particularly with mental health advisory for politicians. So I definitely suggest like anyone listening who's interested, NAMI, New York State lobbies, they have like Mental Health Advocacy Week where we talk to politicians and let them know what's really going on. They share intimate stories. But finally, since we're winding down on time, any closing words and where can people get in contact with you and find out about the amazing work that all of you are doing? Spirit's ready to unthing. You know the deal.
Well, exactly. So mine, I'm Talk to Spirit everywhere. You can find me on all of my social media. I Talk to Spirit. And, I love to say I do different things everywhere. So I do a live mental health chat on Facebook every week. I give motivational quotables and put up clips on Instagram. And then I go to war. I always say Twitter is my advocacy place. That's where I just unleash on folks. And then I, do whatever. So I think you can always find me there. I actually am going to be, I've accepted a position as an instructor with Morris Brown College this fall. So I'm going to be teaching some and trying to get that next generation of researchers passionate and inspired about the field and why representation matters, not just as researchers, but also as participants. So we can make sure that that data is rich like it needs to be and not oversaturated with some populations that have just been overstudied ad nausea. And I think that the real thing is what I want to leave people with is remembering that we all, again, have mental health. And before we can talk to other people about their mental health and wellness, let's start with yours. When is the last time that you saw a therapist? Do you talk about that openly and honestly? Are you working through your stuff? Do you realize that therapy recovery is a lifelong journey. Do you walk it like you talk it? And if you don't, then are you a snake oil salesman? And if so, then why? And how do you utilize that as power and empathy to understand that for all of us who are here, if we have any apprehension about utilizing the very services that we're talking about, then how do we, one, become the change that we want to see? And two, how do we recognize that if, as being on the inside, we have a problem, what do you think is happening to everybody else who is further removed from it? So as Bree said about those mega and microcosms, right? And so we have to realize that we all have the power to affect change. And if you are the only person that is a mental health professional that somebody encounters, are you moving them towards mental health and wellness, or are you moving them further away? Because you're always doing one of two things. So stop and ask yourself, but remember that it starts with your care first.
Thank you. Brandon.
So a number of handles for you all. But if you want to follow the work of the AAKOMA project, you can go to Twitter and Instagram, and it is at AAKOMA Project, AAKOMA Project, on Instagram and Twitter. Also, follow our director, Dr. Alfie Breland Noble. She's at Dr. Alfie, so definitely follow her, and also her podcast, Couched in Color. So if you go to Twitter and type in Couched in Color, or go to YouTube, better yet, and type in Couched in Color, you'll be able to see that that YouTube series there, and also the Black Mental Wellness Lounge. We are Black Mental Wellness Lounge on Instagram, and definitely go to YouTube and type in the Black Mental Wellness Lounge. You'll find the page there. And again, like, subscribe to all of these accounts here. And I appreciated the conversation today. It definitely takes all of us and the work that we're doing to be able to move this needle forward. And I think there's so many people engaged and activated right now to want to make change across these systems and to break down these barriers. And so connect with the next person. As Spirit said it earlier, we're not in competition. We're not in competition. The need is too great. The issues are too large, and we've been, intentionally pushed to the side in this space. And so it's going to take all of us working together to move this forward. And I appreciate each of the panelists tonight, and I'm just honored to be a part of it.
Bree.
Yeah, likewise. I'm so thrilled to be here, and really happy and honored and humbled to be here. You can reach me at Twitter, usually at Brianna A. Baker, or my website, the inquiry box there, www.briannaabaker.com. It's probably the easiest two ways to reach me. You can also follow my YouTube channel, which is Becoming Dr. Baker, and on Instagram, Becoming Dr. Baker as well. And then finally, follow Black and Mental Health on Twitter as we gear up for our week. And we have events throughout the year, and just really awesome tweets, lots of retweets, amplifying the Black and mental health community on Twitter. So definitely follow that. And I would just say, my biggest piece of advice is just not to underestimate yourself. I think I spent way too long being invisible or thinking that my voice didn't matter because of age, because of race, because of gender identity, or where I'm at, physically or geographically. So the change that I've been able to enact in this very small community where I never thought the needle would move has been such a rewarding and such an impactful experience for me to realize that, what we say and what we do matters, and it's going to affect the person next to us. So I would just say, don't underestimate yourself. Don't let imposter syndrome or internalized, white supremacy or whatever it is get to you, because that you can do this.
Thank you so much, everyone on the panel. I want to leave everyone with a quote by the Black woman who started this Minority Mental Month, which is now BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month, where it says, people of color, particularly African Americans, feel stigma more keenly. In a race-conscious society perceived of having another deficit. And I want to say to you that anyone listening, that you are not alone. Clearly, our panelists are here doing amazing works in various different areas, some in multiple areas. in order to ensure mental wellness and for you to receive the help that you need in the future. Get the help. We're here to help you. And we hope that you join us in pushing forward and shaping and shifting Black mental wellness. Thank you again for my panelists for joining me today. I was blown away by this conversation and appreciate you all so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Get in the fight, stay in the fight. Thank you for everybody who's here. We need you.
Yeah,
Stay in the
everyone's
trenches,
giving
guys.
you like amazing compliments in the chat. You really have no questions. I guess you answered it all.
We did a good job then. Thank you, guys.
Everyone goes. I would love for the panelists to share their information with me, and we can put this video in tomorrow's e-news, so you can subscribe to our e-news. The video will be there. It's also on our Facebook page. We did stream live, so you can go to our Facebook page, just NAMI New York State, and you'll find it there. And tomorrow you'll find it on our YouTube channel, so you can also share it that way. We usually share it again on our Instagram as well, so please follow us. And I just want to thank you all so much again. This was such a great, important conversation. And LaShawn, thank you for all the work you've been doing to put these together. We couldn't do it without you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So again, just wanted to mention that in 2 weeks, August 3rd, we'll be holding another discussion and on Indigenous mental health and recovery. So we hope we see you all there. Thank you and have a great night. And again, if you haven't tried therapy, as I said, reach out. At NAMI, we talk about it openly. So if you're interested in learning about that, please check out our website, email us, email me, info@NAMI-NYSstate.org, and we're happy to help to connect you with support groups and other programs. Okay, thank you. Have a great night, everyone. I don't know if you want to say anything else, LaShawn.
No, I think everything's said. I think that one thing that I do want to add, though, in regards to NAMI, is the peer-to-peer program. So if therapy is not the route that you want to go and you want to talk to individuals who are having similar experiences as you, there's that. And there's also programming for family members to get the mental health literacy and understanding how to help and aid their spouses and loved ones through the entire process of living with the mental illness. So that's all I have to say. Have a great night, everyone.
You too, LaShawn. I took a class with you at NAMI.
Awesome. Who's that?
Louise.
Hi, Louise. Yeah, we're NAMI New York City ambassadors.
Yes, you look great.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.